everybody and welcome to today's video. I have been playing a lot of Wingspan now that it has been released on the Nintendo Switch, and it has reminded me that the console has become a really good platform for digital board games. As a big time fan of board games, I have played through everything that has released on the Switch. So I thought that I'd do a list of the 10 best digital board games currently available on the console. Now of course, because I've only got 10 to work with, there are a lot that I didn't have room to mention in this list. So if you do have a favourite that I haven't mentioned, please do let us know in the comments your own picks as well, because there are a lot of very good board games on the Nintendo Switch. I already mentioned Wingspan, so we'll talk about that one first. Wingspan is a brilliant little game that has been turning heads since its first release back in 2019. It's one of those streamlined modern Euro games where you're not directly competitive with your opponents, but rather focused on accumulating points throughout the game and winning by having the most points at the end. In Wingspan, you do that by collecting a broad range of birds, forest, field and water-based birds, and then using resources to summon them to the playfield. Each type of bird and landscape provides benefits back to you, and at the same time you're racing against the other players to achieve objectives at a regular interval for a big boost in points. All of this is very easy to learn, courtesy of a short 10-minute tutorial, but the variety of the game is so deep that it will take a long time to master. It's also a game that is known for its brilliant depictions of wild birds through the art, and on the Nintendo Switch that art is animated in the most exceptionally beautiful and elegant way, and indeed the quality of the port across the board is exceptional. The user interface is accessible and comfortable, the AI is challenging without being cheating, and the game moves along at a snappy pace thanks to the ease of which you can navigate around it. This is the perfect adaptation of one of the most successful and popular board games in recent years. Next up is Amelo, which is a digital-only board game that would be absolutely impossible to replicate as an analog board game. It's simply too complex in its rules and systems to work as a physical board game, but it is worth learning its many systems because this game is richly evocative in a way that a lot of board game ports to digital platforms can't be. There are 4 animal heroes that are vying for control of a kingdom as the king of that kingdom descends into madness and corruption. There are multiple different ways to achieve this victory, and any number of permeations on how to spend your time in chasing any of those goals. There is magic to cast, there are enemies to fight, quests to clear, and dungeons to delve deeply into for treasure and reward. And that's only the tip of the iceberg, really. There's an awful lot more that you can do in Amelo. With such an expansive range of characters, each with their own personalities, backstories, and playstyles, Amelo's great strength as a board game is that every adventure is an entirely different experience, and playing well has as much to do with your ability to adapt to the changing conditions on the fly as it is to master any one particular playstyle. It's also an utterly gorgeous game with a real Animals of Farthing Wood meets Lord of the Rings vibe, and that has certainly helped cement it as one of my most played games on the Switch. Now for something entirely different in terms of aesthetics and tone, Billion Road is a road trip through Japan crossed with Monopoly, and it is a bright, cheerful, and hugely engaging little board game. On a basic level, you'll be buying and upgrading properties just like you would in a game like Monopoly, but unlike Monopoly, the goal isn't really to get other players to land on those properties and pay money to you. The map is so big that doesn't happen that very often. Rather, the goal is to dash across Japan to specific locations, amassing huge amounts of wealth along the way, dealing with the occasional giant monster attack, or collecting friendly monsters to help you along the way, while also making sure that you're not the furthest away from an objective when somebody else gets there, because if you are the furthest away, you get a horrible monster sicked onto you, which will bring some absolutely terrible fortune. If you've ever played a Square Enix Itadaki Street, which are also known as Boom Street or Fortune Street in the West, the few times that they've been localized, then Billion Road shares some of the aesthetics and charm that make those games such a delight to play. The only warning I have with this one is that if you are going to play Billion Road, make sure that you have a healthy chunk of time available to you, because this game can be a very long, drawn-out game indeed. Fourth on our little list is Lord of the Rings: The Adventure card game. Now, I love Lord of the Rings. It's actually one of my favourite books of all time, and I find the films to be incredibly rewatchable. The video games over the years, however, have been really hit and miss, with some capturing the essence of the property beautifully, while others being generic nonsense that have traded on the license and offered nothing of their own. The adventure card game belongs to the former, and it does a better job at most at capturing the epic appeal and storytelling of Lord of the Rings. It is a principally single-player card game that actually does a good job of telling stories within the Lord of the Rings world by using a combination of cutscenes and card game mechanics. One adventure might involve a half dozen or more games with the cards, each of which will be split up with cutscenes that further the story, and then the card games will have unique mechanics related to that story to give you the overall impression that you're playing through a campaign within the Lord of the Rings world. Simple card game mechanics that will be familiar to Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering fans help to make this a very easy game to get into, and while there is a lack of competitive modes, which makes the deck building side of the game a little bit less compelling because you're not comparing your ability to build a great deck with what your opponents can do, there are still a lot of different cards to play around with and to challenge yourself in the very replayable skirmish mode as well. Next up we have Chess Ultra. Chess is, of course, one of the most well-known and respected board games of all time. Mastering chess is a lifelong pursuit for many people, and while most of us have absolutely no aspirations of becoming a grandmaster, being a competitive chess player is still good for the brain, as it tests logic and tactics in an incredibly complex way. What's more, it just plain feels good to win a tightly fought game of chess. Victory in chess feels like something earned, as opposed to just the end of the process of playing a board game. There have been a lot of chess games produced over the years, and there are actually quite a few of them on the Switch itself already. But of those, Chess Ultra is by far the best. There are robust online modes, and there is exceptional AI across a broad range of skill levels that will be more than enough to keep chess fans playing on for a long time. It's also no exaggeration to say that this game is gorgeous, with a huge range of chess sets and background settings that enhance both serious play and any sheer novelty that you may be in the mood for. From the elegance of an airy museum through to the sinister obsidian of hell itself, and no, really, that is a setting in the game, Chess Ultra proves that presentation can enhance a game even as abstract and basic in design, in terms of the pieces and the playstyle and the shape of the board and whatever, as chess is. Next up is Dobutsu Shogi World. Shogi, which is often called Japanese chess as they do share some similarities in design, is an incredibly complex game, even in comparison to chess itself. The way that the pieces move, are promoted, and can return to the board after being captured adds nuances to the basic structure of chess, which can make it difficult to learn the game. This is compounded by the fact that in Shogi, all the pieces are represented by Japanese kanji characters, and for a Westerner, it can take a while to wrap the head around what each of the pieces on the board do when you're looking at them all at once. Dobutsu Shogi World is based on a real-world training system designed to get children in Japan familiar with shogi before moving them on to the full game. The kanji characters are replaced by cute animals, with dots on the pieces to show where they can move. You start by playing on a super simplified board before moving up to a medium-sized board and eventually a full-sized board at the end of the process. At that point, in Dobutsu Shogi World, you don't play with real shogi pieces yet, but what you do get to do is play full games, either against other human players or the AI. There are 8 AI levels that, by the end of that, will have you comfortably competent as a shogi player. And that makes this game the most perfect way to start learning the incredibly rich and complex game of shogi that we've ever had in the West. Now we move on to Raiders of the North. In comparison to Wingspan, Raiders of the North is not quite up to the same standards as a Eurogame. It's still a lot of fun, which is why it is on this list ahead of something like Catan, because I'm not much of a fan of Catan, to be honest, but its systems are not quite as compelling in themselves as they are in Wingspan. The port quality of Raiders of the North to the Nintendo Switch, however, is absolutely spectacular, with some gorgeously rendered art, plenty of animated elements to make it a little bit more dynamic, and a very clean UI. In Raiders of the North, you need to build up raiding expeditions to attack settlements across the ocean. It's quite obviously retelling the story of the Viking raids on England, though the map represents a fantastic version of the story and it isn't the Norse and a map of England. You need to collect the resources to fill the boats of your warships, and as you raid even more deeply into the rival territory, you need ever more powerful raiding forces, though the rewards in return are even greater as well. You compete against a number of other raiding forces, though there is no direct competition between you and the other players, and the winner is the one that has managed to build the resources the most effectively to raid the most locations along the way. The spanner in the works here is that you're all sharing the same village, and that village's facilities, such as a mill to produce food or the barracks to produce soldiers. Each of those facilities has a limited number of uses per turn, so you need to be quite flexible with your own strategy and on the fly based on what your other players are doing. Now we move on to 51 Clubhouse games, or worldwide games depending on where you live in the world. Nintendo's own Clubhouse games is an excellent collection of games, but it is a master of none of them. It has got chess, though it's not as good as Ultra Chess. It's got Hanafita, though it is not as good as the dedicated Hanafita game that is also on the Switch. But then on top of those, it has tabletop baseball, bowling, mahjong, Texas Hold'em, and plenty of other really great games to play as well. They're all playable online, and they are all a joy to play in the way that they're done in this game. In other words, 51 Clubhouse games works as a brilliant introduction to classic board and parlour games from around the world. It knows its role in all of this because it's even got little bits of trivia that pop up about each game whenever you get into them. Then you play them, discover the ones that you like the most, and the idea is that you're meant to go looking for further opportunities to play these games in the future. The system works too. So for example, while I was familiar with all the games in the Switch 51 Clubhouse games going in, the previous version of the series on the Nintendo DS was actually the way that I got introduced to Hanafita for the first time. I played it on the DS, loved it, didn't understand it for quite a while, but as I got familiar with it, I loved it even more, and now I am an avid fan of Hanafita and play it constantly. That's the impact that 51 Clubhouse games can have in introducing you to some of your new favourite things. Second last on our list is Minano Hanafita. I mentioned that the Switch had a better Hanafita game than what was offered by 51 Clubhouse games, and this is it. Not only is this dedicated Hanafita app absolutely gorgeous in how it renders the beautiful art of a Hanafita deck, but it's also got far more in-depth gameplay options. And where 51 Clubhouse games only allows you to play a truncated version of the real Hanafita, this app has the full game with many difficulty levels to help you go from being an enthusiast of the game to a master of it. The only downside is that it is only available on the Japanese eShop at the moment, and it is only available in Japanese, neither of which is a huge problem, however. You can have multiple accounts on your Nintendo Switch, meaning that it is very easy to set up a Japanese secondary account, buy this game, and then play it on your normal account once it has been downloaded. It's absolutely no problem to do that. Once you know how to play Hanafita as well, the lack of English text won't be a problem either, since there's not much text in the game in the first place, and you'll be able to follow along with what's happening because you already know the rules of it. Finally, Evolution. I want to mention Evolution, which, like Wingspan, is a fairly new game on the Nintendo Switch, and I don't think anybody should miss out on it. Evolution's strongest selling point is that it is a case of genuine edutainment. In playing the game, you do gain an insight into how ecosystems and animal species evolve, and the game is actually used in some educational settings for this reason. At the same time, it is very good entertainment and an excellent board game all into itself, with plenty of complex systems that provide for a lot of tactical approaches to victory. The basic idea is to earn points by having an ecosystem of animals that are thriving and consuming more food than your opponents are. To do that, you need to level up herbivores and also evolve some animals into carnivores so that they'll eat your rivals and keep their populations down. Of course, you can also evolve defenses in the herbivores against the predators to help protect them from the prowling carnivores of your rivals. This is a dynamic, fluid, and hugely entertaining board game thanks to the way that this evolution system works. And that's it for this video and list. If there are any Switch board games that you love that I haven't included on this list, be sure to let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. There are a lot that I could have entered and added, but didn't have room for, unfortunately. Thanks as always for tuning in. Please do mash that like and subscribe button so you won't miss any of the videos in the future. There's even a bell icon, which if you click that, you'll get notifications whenever I upload a new video, so consider that as well. And also please consider backing me on Patreon if you like my work. As I continue to grow this channel, that support will be essential in helping me to do new things with it, and I have plenty of new things that I would like to do with it, so yes, please do consider a bit of support there. But thanks as always for tuning in, and we will see you at the next video.